have learned that there is a beautiful transition process that we go through in crossing over. Nobody comes here alone. Nobody arrives in Earth alone. It's impossible to be alone when you're born. But also, nobody's supposed to be alone when they pass. And I don't mean a hospital room. I mean no soul is alone when they pass. So whether it's a spirit or a guide, or sometimes an intuitive that is just there to be present, somebody will show up. So nobody comes in here alone and nobody leaves alone. And I find that really beautiful. But the transition is quite fascinating.
Still have questions after watching these videos? Perfect. Come hang out with me on Wake Up Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will answer your questions live. And you never know what surprise guests might show up. Thank you for watching. My guest today is Isabeau Maxwell, who is a psychic medium, and her specialty is crossing people over after they die. But she also has a technique that her spirit guide taught her that will help you to be able to use your intuition. And she's going to share that today. So, Beau, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. And we discovered that there is a strong potential that we are cousins related on our mother's sides.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
It is so wild. I love
We
this.
gotta figure that out for sure.
It's going to be a great conversation. So I want to start with this intuition, because I think people won't tune in because they want to hear about you, but they're also like, what can I get out of this? And I think it's fascinating that you had a conversation with your spirit guide where he shared with you about intuition and how everybody's intuitive. Well, let's start there. It's an unusual place for me to start, but let's start with something right out of the gate that people are going to be able to use for themselves.
When I worked with my first guide, in essence, I mean, technically my grandma was my first guide, but my first teaching guide, right? I was a skeptic before that. So I'm the person that says, if I can do it, you can do it. And there's actually right out of the gate, my number one tool that I tell anybody and everybody is GCP, Ground Clear Protect. Do that in that order. And by doing that, you're consciously paying attention to your energetic system, what you want in your system, and also what you don't want to carry through your day. When you do that, it's in essence like a car wash for the soul. It's like clears you out and you have more ability to access more of your intuition that way. Intuition is completely natural, normal for everybody. It's just blocked. It's cluttered.
Why do you think it's so blocked and cluttered? What clutters it? What stops it?
People. No, honestly, if you look back over the years, it used to be very natural. It used to be part of integrated in every culture. But then, we started farming and we stayed still. And then, people got jobs and then you do this and you do this and you do this, all the way to where we're raised that this is the classroom you need to be in from this time and then here and then here. And then this is what you're going to eat and this is what you're going to do. And if you're hungry, you got to order DoorDash. So we don't have a lot of need for it. Take that and combine it with the fact that we see, and I'm not going to know the right number here off the top of my head, but like 5, 6, 7,000 bits of data like every minute or second. I know there's a statistic there that I'm butchering, but there's so much information that comes in that our brains are absolutely wired to filter out the majority of it. And that's information from the outside. And that's also information from within you as well, when there's too much energy, too much involvement. So it's a combination of overwhelm, and clutter, really. And then the triple effect of that is we don't really need to use it so much anymore.
So it was a protection, it was a guide. And now because we're so sheltered, we're not living on the plains, worried
Hmm.
about wild animals, worried about, well, I mean, there are people who have to worry about somebody coming in and taking over, but yeah, for the large part. But
Yeah.
you also mentioned one time in an interview that you use a white light of protection. And I've talked about this on my channel over the years, how you
Hmm.
create a bubble around yourself. You could do it lots of different ways. But you said something fascinating that I would love for you to elaborate on. You said you use a filtered bubble. And I was like, I have never heard anybody say that. So will you explain what you mean and what your method is for protecting yourself?
Yeah. So the breakdown of GCP is number one, to ground. When we ground ourselves, I thought that was counterintuitive when I first opened up. I was like, why do I want to ground myself if I'm trying to like communicate with up there kind of stuff? But the first step is to ground. When you think of it as the deeper you can bury a telephone pole, the taller it can be with stability. That's kind of the concept of grounding. So in whatever way you want, ask Mother Earth to help ground you, right? The second one is to clear out any energies that aren't yours. We are magnets for this stuff. We are either empathic or we were programmed to take on other people's energies as well because of the niceties. And so we go through the day and we collect energies that we don't have to carry. That typically looks like mental stewing at night and things like this. So we're going to clear it out. Pick your favorite element. Imagine that element going all the way through you, washing it all away, blowing it all away. It's the bubble at the end, the protective sort of white light bubble that is the filtration system. So imagine a bubble around you. It encapsulates all of you. It encapsulates your energy field, which is now clean, by the way. It's grounded and it's clean, and now you're going to encapsulate it. And that bubble is a filtration system allowing in what's for your highest good, but not allowing in what's not for your highest good. You can even request that verbally when you imagine the bubble. And what's going to happen is the highs are going to be higher and the lows are going to be a little less low. But the key is you're still going to have the lows because sometimes we have to have those situations, right? So I run into a situation and I'm having a tough time. I don't know. I don't argue much anymore. but but let's say I get into, somebody picks a fight or there's an argument. I will do GCP. I will ground clear protect really fast. If the energy is still affecting me, that means the filtration system let it in. So it is for my highest good. This is something I have to be conscious of. But if it blocks it out, this is not on my path. This is not the energy that I have to carry. And now I'm actually in a better situation to maybe even help the person. You know what I mean?
Talk about helping a person.
Yeah.
What you just said, people need to go back and rewind and listen to again because you just gave somebody a massive key, which again alludes to something we talk about a lot on the show is that everything is happening for you and not to you because people always do the what ifs in the comments. Well, what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
And you just highlighted that there are things that are meant to happen that will happen that you're going to perceive as bad. Wait a minute, I was protecting myself. Why did this happen? And you
Yeah.
just shared it. So is this coming from your spirit team in how you've learned it or from your experiences over time? Like, how do you understand this about we have these certain things that we're going to have to go through in our experience that we're going to label as good, better, worst, but they're meant for us for a higher purpose?
Yeah. Well, like I said, much of what I learned in those first 2 years working with my guide. So if we take it back, I was 32, it's about 20, 21 years ago. So I was 32 and I was a complete skeptic. Math major in college. I have a math degree. Science is the only thing. I wasn't religious. I wasn't spiritual. I thought it was all, fraudulent. So my grandmother passes away across the country. I wasn't able to be there. It was the middle of the day. I'm standing in my living room like an hour or so later, and I was alone. And she showed up in spirit form right in front of me. And she was like 70% solid. It wasn't one of those situations where you see something out of the corner of your eye and you can blow it off. This was full on right in front of me. And my brain only contained a dictionary of like horror movies and stuff. So I got frightened instantly and I think I blurted out something like, don't do that again. And then I blew it off. I'm like, this is grief. This isn't real. Next morning, my husband at the time woke up, said he had a very realistic dream, and described in detail what she was wearing when I saw her the night before, even though I hadn't told him about it. So I thought maybe this would be real. So I started working on communicating with her. It was really slow going at first. I didn't see her or hear her again for months, but eventually I started to build up that connection. Then I connected with my spirit guide that I'm talking about. I called him Big Dog. That was like my nickname for him. And I would go out and I would meet with him in a certain location out in the woods couple times a week for 2 years. You should see the journal. It was a lot of information. And he was great because he would give me a little snippet and my skeptic brain would be like, no. And then within a couple of days, somebody else would present that same thing to me in a different way, like total synchronicity. I was like, you're pretty good at this. That's pretty cool. So that's where I learned most all of this, how the in-between works, how linear time works, how past lives are not linear, how why we have these experiences, all of those types of things. That's where I learned most of it.
I love that you said that you went in the woods to go find him for two
Yeah.
years, but tell
Yeah.
everybody what the joke was on you about going to the woods to find him.
It was. Do you mean the driveway moment?
Yes.
Yes. I was so frustrated. So when I first opened up, I was super type A and just impatient and, a little ornery. And I've gained so much patience and calm and compassion at this point. But he had me going out there every 2 to 3 days. He'd be like, I'll see you on Wednesday. I'll see you on Friday. And after like 2 years, I'm driving out of this property and he shows up in the driveway in front of my car. And I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, you can go anywhere, which surprises me that I would even think that at that point after understanding everything. And I'm like, you had me coming out here for 2 years. You could have met me in my living room. And so,
Like
yeah,
you owe me some gas money.
yeah, you owe me some gas money and some time, okay? So, but it was a commitment piece. It really was. I believe energetically that those 2 years, I was not only stepping into a commitment that you see me living now,
Mhm.
but I believe it was an energetic process. And I probably, I had two younger kids at home and a little chaos house, so it all worked. It all worked.
I love that story. I think that that is so awesome. So you said that he's taught you all kinds of things about linear time, about past lives, and about why we're here. So let's
Yeah.
start with the why we're here. What has your spirit team imparted to you about the purpose of why we're here? What are we doing on this earth?
I inquired. And my inquiry started with something like, why are we here? Why are we here? We're here to learn, because we hear that a lot. Earth is a school. That's when he helped me understand the function of linear time versus nonlinear time on the other side. So when we understand from the perspective of our higher self, that's when we understand why we're here. So, spoiler alert, there's good stuff and bad stuff. We can't change that. It's part of the program. But from the perspective of the higher self, this is how I explain it to my students. If you imagine that your higher self is a ball of light and you're surrounded by your soul group, bunch of balls of light floating around. In between each soul have like a string of energy, right? So it ends up being this like multi-dimensional spider web. And the ones closest to you are your soulmates, outer ring, friends and family. And all of you are going to have a bunch of different lives. Now, on the other side, there isn't linear time. So, your higher self says, I want to have a life down on earth. You take a little chunk of that light out and you send it down into a little body, and it has, it's down there for like 102 years, right? It lets go of the body and then it returns back to the higher self. And when it returns back, it's bringing back with it all of the experiences that it had on earth. So, from the higher self perspective, all of our lives are happening at the same time if there is not such a thing as linear time on the other side. So, that is a long answer to say we are looking for experiences and how experiences on linear time affect emotions. Another way to say that is, and it's kind of corny, but it's just a corny example. Let's say your higher self, every lifetime you have, you love botanicals and gardens and plants. You can have that love as your higher self, but you can't experience what it's like to put the seeds in the ground, wait for it to grow, harvest it. You can't experience that until you're on linear time. So the higher self is kind of hungry for those types of experiences with various emotions.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about those soul groups. So I think that because of different movies that have portrayed things as like one soulmate, and I love your web analogy. I did a tree analogy with soulmates, kind of similar to what you did.
Yeah.
I sat in the largest cottonwood tree in Sedona in Arizona, and I used the just how the branches were like, here's a little branch with the little leaves, this is your closest soul group, and then the one in the branch next to you, those still might be pretty close, like, but you're attached to all the ones on the bigger branch, but then the next branch over from you, they're a different kind of soulmate. So what is a
Yeah.
soul group as far as what you've come to understand it?
I understand. I like the analogy of the multidimensional spider web because one of the points to emphasize there is we tend to have more than one soulmate while we're here. I know it can be romanticized into, lovers, but the truth is that we can not only have multiple soulmates here on Earth, but we can have soulmates that it feels very negative, right? Like you can look at a horrible ex and go, yeah, that was a soulmate. Well, why would you be soulmates with that? Like, why would you not be madly in love forever? Soulmates are like launching pads. They launch you into some of the biggest experiences that you're supposed to be submersed into. So you can have like an abusive mom. Well, that everything you experience from that is launching you into something. You can have a soulmate that is like your best friend in the entire world. But that's the biggest takeaway from that I experience is the ones closest to you have big impacts. Big, big impacts. Like my best friend came into my life when I was in my 30s, and I just absolutely changed my life just by being how awesome she is. So, yeah,
That helps a lot, I think, for people that might have a different perception about what they are. So, tell us a little bit about what you've understood about past lives. So, one of the things that's really interesting on this channel is I've done lots of videos, and the ones that I've done on reincarnation or the ones where somebody talks about reincarnation, sometimes my audience gives a lot of pushback. They don't understand it, they don't believe it. In my personal opinion, from my experiences and from what I've researched, there's a mountain of evidential evidence around past lives. I don't even know why we're having the conversation anymore. It's like, do you want to talk about the tectonic plates and whether they exist or not? Like, it's just a done deal as far as I'm concerned. But
yeah.
you also talked about this from that perspective of you're having things that are happening at the same time.
Mhm.
So, can you marry those two different ideas to kind of explain past lives?
Yes, and once I was able to really kind of grasp the concept, the only thing that gets lost is the idea of karma. So we can talk about that as well. But in essence, again, back to the higher self and the perspective, not on linear time. All those little balls of light throwing into all the different lifetimes are all happening at the same time. That means your past lives are happening. That means you could have a current life happening right now. That means your future lives are happening. That means your lives on other planets are also happening. All of these are happening at once. So if we look at lives not lined up in a row with our human mentality, but stacked. Yeah, stacked on top of each other. And then on top of it, energetically, there's energy flowing because you're connected. You're connected to your higher self, so is all of your other lives. So that really realistic dream you had about being like a lion tamer back in the day or whatever, you might be connecting with another past life. I also don't discount at all past life regression. It is. It is. You're just not going back on actual time in your conscious stream. You're going parallel to one of your lives that happens to have started there. I love the Star Trek holodeck. I always go back to that because that's kind of what it's like. Each one of these lives went into a holodeck and the holodeck programmed to say it's 1910 or it's 2015. Do you know what I mean? And they're all happening more so at the same time.
Okay, that's excellent. And I want to confirm something that you said earlier about how your spirit team showed you that there was just a small piece that came into the human incarnation. When I
Mhm.
was on the other side in one of my earlier journeys, I had an experience as my higher self. And what was intuited to me is that the portion of my higher self in this human incarnation would be equal to my pinky fingernail. Like it's a teeny, teeny, tiny amount, which speaks to the massive power that we are as souls. This is
Hmm.
something really that I built my whole channel on. I want to awaken people to help them understand the power of who they are. So,
Yes.
Bo, who in the world are we as these powerful souls from what you've been able to understand with your experiences in your spirit team?
That's a good question. That's a big question. I love that. When I connected with my higher self. I had a little bit different experience, but we're all wired differently too. But when I heard you describe it, I'm like, yes, that's kind of what I experienced as well. That all of the higher selves all make up one self. So if we look at start it from there, the one self is containing all the higher selves, and the higher self contains every single lifetime. This one being is literally sending out variations of different higher selves to have different variations of the same lifetimes most of the time, and then collecting them. And I remember asking my guide, what's the purpose of collecting them? Right? And if you're not on linear time, are you collecting? Like, because you need linear time to collect. These are the conversations I had for hours out in the woods with the man that could have showed up in my living room. But anyway, the purpose is it's all instantaneous. And when I asked that question, his response was that one moment where all that happens is only one moment. And then that being has many moments. So then that just took it to a completely different level. We're just a piece of a larger piece of a larger piece that's almost playing like a symphony and experiencing a symphony with all of it. It's really quite astonishing.
It is. I love that. I've never heard anybody call it a symphony before, but it resonates because every single note is needed. Every
Yes.
single instrument is needed.
Yeah. So if you wanted to hear that music, you'd have to put yourself on linear time. So if this being wants to hear that, wants to create a symphony within itself of experiences, it has to create form. It has to create source. And that's where it builds a bunch of holodecks.
That's great. Okay, so for you personally, you
Yeah.
have been doing this for 20 years. You started out 20 years ago as a super skeptic because your
Yep.
mother did not acknowledge any of these abilities. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, what do you think you know to be true now that you didn't really understand 20 years ago? Like, how did this experience of mediumship and connecting with your spirit team open you up to understand things in such a different way that maybe your life is different?
My life is so different. If you would have told me 20 some years ago that this is where I would have been sitting, I would have laughed you out of the room. I would have been just like, no, mm-mm. So we can start with me letting go of some of the know-it-all, that's for sure. When you start to see more, how do I want to elaborate on that? Okay, when we come down here, part of being that little speck of the whole being is we shield ourselves from all of the knowledge of the higher self. It's why the analogy of the ball just takes a little piece out, comes down. That's because we don't have full access to all higher self knowledge. So we kind of, put the blinders on and come on down here. And everyone has a different set of blinders. Mine were pretty big. Mine were pretty big. And they were so big that they pretty much just made sure that I was mostly thinking about me. And once you start letting go of those blinders and understanding the connections that we have with each other and understanding some of the reasons that we're here and I mean, the whole world changes. You start to realize that it's not about you always. It is, right? It's not about you always, but you're playing out a play. You're on stage with the people that you love the dearest. You've all come down here and you've all agreed to be on stage, and everyone's playing a role. And then you start to see how the roles affect each other. That's when you can finally get to a space. Well, I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. That's where I was able to finally get to a point where I could hold space for other people and respect the roles that they were here to play, whether they be good or bad. And you change the lens that you're looking through to understand the why instead of the what about it.
Okay. Wow. So you also use tools in the very beginning to help you. And one
Yeah.
of them was a pendulum. And I've
Yeah.
just got to say, like, there was a time in my life when I was obsessed with the pendulum. I don't know if I used it correctly, but I would use just a thread or a double thread, and I would take something energetically that belonged to me, like a ring from when I was a little kid, and I would
Yeah.
hang it over my hand, and I would hold my hand like this, and I would ask yes and no questions, and I would say, I assume that a yes is a circle, a no is a straight back and forth. Please make them obvious so that I can understand them. And I would ask all these questions. But then when I would get the answers, I would always doubt it because
Yeah.
there was no backup to really, giving me answers. And some of the things really did come true that I asked about, some things that kind of blew me away. And I was just like, no. Or you'd get the answer and it wasn't really the answer you wanted. So you didn't
Yeah.
want to believe it. And then it come to be true a little bit more. So will you explain how pendulums worked from your perspective and how other people can use them? And do you think it's like a really reliable way to get information from the other side if you're kind of new to all the spirituality stuff?
I think it's reliable, but it depends on the user.
Okay.
It's
Fair.
user based. User
Okay.
based. That's fair. It worked fantastic for me. Actually, it was the pendulum message that made me finally say, okay, this is real. So I was 2 months in with my grandmother. And I remember saying to her, because again, my kids were young, and I said, hey, I'm going to need you to actually send me something that's some proof-based thing here, hon, because if I can't hear you, I can't see you. And so I need to know if I need to go like get my head checked. Okay. Because like I'm raising two kids here. So um, it was either that day or the next day. I don't remember, but I was alone in the car running errands and I did feel sensations. Like I felt like a super strong rush mixed with goosebumps. And I would always say, well, that's her. So now I'm going to take the pendulum out and ask her questions. So I pulled over. 20 minutes. I got a very detailed question, narrowed it down, took a long time. The detailed answer was that my mom would call me. This was the message from her. My mom would call me for money, but it would be somebody else that would end up helping my mom. It would be her friend that would help her, not me. And I said, good. This is detailed enough that I can, call the doctor when it doesn't happen, right? So driving along, my mom calls and I'm like, huh. She asked for help with money. She said, I'm in Vegas. I need you to move money. I said, all right. And then this was so long ago that I had to drive to my bank and get cash and then drive to hers and deposit cash. Yeah, no such thing as instant transfers back then. And I'm driving thinking, we do this all the time. We do this all the time. She pays me back. She moves money we do this all the time. And I pulled into the parking lot and she called back again and said, hey, don't deposit it. My friend wired me the money. And that was the day that I never looked back. That was the day that I said, okay, I'm in. Here's the interesting thing that happened as a result. The minute my belief system kicked in, something opened. Something opened. And it was like all of a sudden the intuition started coming faster and faster and more and more and more. So there is some truth to belief structures. And I tell people if you can sit for 5 minutes a day and total absolute belief, let your system feel what that feels like, you're going to open up your intuitive channel faster. But let me get back to pendulum. My apologies. Um, for me, the biggest question is, am I moving it? The answer is yes. Intuition comes into your system. So your intuition is your sixth sense. That sixth sense delivers the message through your other five senses. So if an intuitive message comes in and it's going to come through the pendulum, it can come through your nervous system, which means little tiny twitches can indeed move it. You're not consciously asking for those little twitches. So I tell people it's okay if it's you moving it, just don't try to move it and you're going to be good. Okay. But the second part, and this is the user part, if we set any sort of intent or if we have skin in the game, right? If we are really worried about something, then our left brain is going to overwrite our right brain and we're going to get in the way. So if we ask a question, I have a friend, I'm worried about the friend, are they going to be okay? And I'm not able to be comfortable with whatever the answer is, like purely okay with that, then I'm probably not going to be very accurate with the pendulum. So this is what I do. Um, Number one, I try to see if I can set it aside. But number two, I take out index cards and write the answers down, fold them up so they match, mix them up, put them on a table, and I'll hold the pendulum over each and say, tell me which one it is. That gets me out of the way because I'm getting in my way. Like I still to this day can get in my way.
This is a gold nugget.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things in the world to do. So
Okay, so go back again because people don't always know. You don't have to go buy a pendulum. You don't have to go buy a special crystal or anything. Tell
mhm.
people what you use because I shared what I use, but what did you use?
I use twine and my grandmother's engagement ring.
Wow.
Super fancy. Super fancy. Yeah. I tell people if you can make it a personal item like you did, it helps a lot. It helps a lot. You can have multiple pendulums. You can have, one for this, one for that. If you find one in a store and it just connects to your heart, go for it. It's the meaning behind it more than how pretty it is. So,
Okay, so you have your pendulum. Do
yep.
you do an instruction about yes or no, circles, how it swings? What do you do? Like I want like the I want the step-by-step instruction for somebody who wants to try this.
Yes. I love how you said circle for yes and then swing for no. I chuckled because for me, I do yes swinging one way and no swinging the other. And I get so into it that then I start asking non yes and no questions and it starts to spin in a big circle, which I always feel like that's my guides rolling their eyes at me like, come on, get back into the game. Um, but in all seriousness, what I found effective for most people that I've met is to start the pendulum. Well, do GCP before you start, please. But once you've done GCP, cleared out all the other energies you don't need, excuse me, cleared all the energies you don't need, um, then ask it to show you what a no is and ask it to show you what a yes is. Like, let your pendulum be on your team, not just this material object that you're using. Let it have its own life and let it have its own like purpose, like a card deck, something like that. Like we've got oracle decks that we bond with sometimes and treat the pendulum the same way and it'll give you a lot more clarity.
This is super helpful. I'm just giggling at the people who are watching who are like, oh my gosh, they've already paused the video. They're in their rooms with
They're
their
looking for index
pendulum,
cards.
like they have
They're
stopped
like, yeah.
watching. But I love the last part of it where you add the index cards, where
Yeah.
you're writing out all these different answers and putting them, folding them,
Yeah.
mixing them up, and let the pendulum decide because you're right, you get you out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to there is some truth, a lot of truth to just sitting and letting yourself receive whatever comes through. Absolutely 100%. But we have to experiment with how we're wired intuitively. And we also have to acknowledge who we are. I mean, so here's another one. This one comes out of the course that I teach. The positive and negative cards. Take 20, we're back to index cards. I can't tell you how many I've bought over the years, but take 20 of them. You got 10 right on 10 of them, like negative, and then on the other 10, write positive, or like yes and no. Okay. Fold them up so they all match, throw them into a bowl, mix them up, pick out one at a time, and intuitively see if it's negative or positive. Now, and I want to elaborate on that, but my point being, with just me and respecting who you are and your personality quirks, I have to put them back in the bowl and mix them up again because I will count. I'll get on number 17 and there's three left in the bowl, and my math brain will be like, "Oh, I know there's two left. So the odds of this is going to be this." So if you know how you get in your own way, just acknowledge it, laugh at it, and create some sort of experiment or situation around it. But what I wanted to also mention was we're all wired differently. And when we try to hone our intuition or access our intuition the way somebody else does, it won't work. And since we don't have a big conversation about that in the world yet, about how we're all different intuitively, how that's not emphasized in pop culture yet, I think a lot of people get discouraged really quickly because they try to do it exactly like the way this person does and it doesn't work. So then they think I must not be intuitive. And the key to this, and this is how I teach, this is like how my courses unfold. The key is to try bunches of different things. So if you're going to do pendulum work, do it inside, do it outside, do it in the morning, do it at night. Full stomach, empty stomach, right? In this room, in that room, in your car, bring it to work. Like try different things different ways, and you're going to start to see. It's kind of like a game of hot and cold. Remember that when we were kids, where somebody would hide something and you'd have to try to find it. And if you got closer, they'd be like, "You're getting warmer and you're getting colder."
You're
Everybody
burning
wants
up.
to, you're burning up. And you're like, it's right here. So, but yeah, the intuition is the same thing. And if you treat it that way, then you'll actually be excited to find out the things that don't work for you, right? Like I'm not tapping in at 8 a.m. That's not going to happen ever. Okay, if it's an emergency, I would tap in at 8 a.m. But hit me up at 1 in the morning and I am on fire. So but my bestie is up at 6 in the morning. So we're all very different. And once we know that, then we can have fun figuring out how it works for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in the beginning of your journey, you shared how you got your message from your grandmother about your mom that was the, okay, I'm all in. You've done this over time. There have to be some messages that you gave that you're like, what are they even communicating? And then you find out later it's something insane. Share a few of the mind blowers that you have given messages to people that were like, what in the world?
The first one that pops into my head is adorable. The young man was maybe 22 years old, and his grandfather came through, and I actually got a name. I don't get them too often. So when they come through, I usually trust them. And I don't even remember the grandfather's name. Let's say it was like George, right? And I said, there's an older man coming through. His name is George. And the young man was like, I don't know any Georges, you know? I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like, just whatever advice, take it, sit with it. And he emailed me and said, I can't believe it. I told my mom I completely forgot that my grandfather's name was George because he's always called him Grandpa. And I was like, that's adorable. That's sweet. That was really, really, really sweet. Yeah. So I did readings for like 15 years and there were so many situations. I remember one that was it's going to sound a little creepy at first, but it ends up not being. A woman came in and I don't remember who came through, somebody came through and said, um, they're showing like a lock of hair and like somebody tying ribbons around it. But there's something about collecting hair. And the woman was like kind of creeped out. She was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And then she reached out to me later and she said, I got home and my daughter was literally doing a school art project with hair. And I was like, that's really cool. So little things like that keep happening. And you just, you know, you struggle because you don't struggle. It helps you to not struggle so much. Doubt is just not our best friend with intuition. And I got to doubt tip I'd love to share. Um, find a journal. I tell all my students this too. Find a journal and make it just for this one purpose. And every time, either in the past, you can catch them up, or current, every time you have a hit, intuitive hit, that is really spot on, the kind where it's like, oh, you can't make this up, right? Every time you have one of those, write it in that journal. Because here's what's happening. You have an intuitive hit and you're like, wow. And then within 24 hours, the synapses in your brain start to go back to their old patterns, and then you're not believing in it anymore. Right. And I know this because first year, I think it was, I met a woman and her grandmother came through, and her grandmother showed me a poodle, and she was feeding the poodle green beans. And I was so new and shy that I was like almost scared to say it, because that was one of my first biggest hits I like had in readings. So I was like, there's no way this. But I said it. I got the courage, and the young lady was like, "That's my grandmother. That's her dog. That's what she gave him, green beans." I spent that whole night at home going, I can't believe it. You can't make this stuff up. Oh my gosh, this is so wild, right? And then I didn't have any readings for like 2 or 3 days. And when I was scheduled to go back to the office, I remember saying to my husband at the time, I don't even know if this stuff is real, man. And he just looked at me and he was like, poodle eating green beans. Stop it. Like he couldn't understand why that didn't just permanently click into place, like ultra belief. Well, my synapses had gone back to its old patterns. And when you have that happen, when you start to feel doubt again, you can open up that journal. You can read those things. You can remind your synapses what is really happening. And then the more often you're in that state of belief with what's actually really happening, the less you will be invited back into doubt.
Oh, this is good. Can I add something to your journal?
Yes, please.
So, when my passed away loved one, Mark, died, I got some really, really significant signs. And when it happened, like the second time it happened, I went and bought a journal and I wrote them down because even though they were so significant, I thought, I'm never going to forget this. I wanted to document it immediately. What I've noticed over time is that you just get bigger and bigger signs. You get more and more synchronicities. You can't remember the specifics because even if your brain takes it out, remembers the poodle, green beans, it might put it back in with poodle and carrots instead.
Right.
You don't remember it the
Exactly.
right way, but it's another confirmation of the specific that happened that you're probably not going to remember 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And it is so it's really good so your brain can't misremember something. But I
Yes.
just think that journaling those things, I know it's kind of a pain. We're all so busy. Like, how do I
Yeah.
find the time? But it is the best tool for me personally. What happened is when I got to his 2 year anniversary of his death, that sign that day on the 2 year anniversary filled the notebook that I had purchased. And then a couple weeks later, he came to me in a dream and told me he was most proud of our story. And a book started writing itself. And I was able to use all of those signs that I documented only for
Hmm.
myself in the book that I could share with full authenticity, that I didn't misremember them, that this is how they happened.
Yes. Yes. And that's same thing. Same thing. We have so many similarities, you and I. It's so much fun. But it's
This
the
was
same
fun.
thing for me. When I wrote my book, Cracking Open, I was so grateful for the journals
Yeah.
because I had been doing kind of a no doubt notebook for myself too, and all the things that were happening to me. And it makes a big difference. And here's another component of intuition. Intuition is in essence being in the moment. Like that's where your access to intuition is. If you're in the future and you're in the past, you're very left brain. Right brain is being very in the moment. So the more you practice with your intuition, the more intuitive messages you get, and I don't want to say the easier it is, but the easier it is for you to access and to be able to tap in, the more you're going to forget what you got because you're in the moment, right? And you're not really marking it as a memory. So really, really strong intuitive moments, you won't remember what you said last sentence and you don't know what the next word's going to be. So for me, a lot of the memories that I share, I mean, I was a reader for 15 years, but I only have like a journal or so, a couple journals worth of experiences that I remember, because if I didn't say them or write them down or repeat them to another person, they're gone. Like those were intuitive moments. Those not aren't in my memory bank, you know?
I agree. And I always say your intuitive experiences that you share confirm mine confirm yours. They just make them more real. But to your point, having something that you can go back to be like, these are really real. And I also feel that over time, our ability to recognize them gets better and better. There's definitely a humor on the other side. I'm sure
Yes.
that you've seen it too, because you're laughing.
Yes.
There is such a humor from the other side that they, I think, chuckle. They get a kick out of, can we pick up what they're putting down?
Mm-hmm. There's absolutely humor on the other side. When I hear somebody open up communication with their guides and say something like, "Oh, my guide was teasing me the other day," or they said it this way, or something like that, I'm like, "Yeah, you're tapped in. You're tapped in," because it's well, source is really in essence unconditional love,
Yeah.
right? So when people ask, well, okay, what are guides? Guides are like the ultimate perfect, unconditionally loving parent. They're going to put you in the place when you need to get put in your place. They're gonna like have you take a left when you think you have to take a right. They're gonna, but they come from unconditional love and source. Laughter comes from that. Joy comes from that. Playfulness comes from that. So if I hear somebody say, "Oh, my one guide is just so angry," and I'm like, I don't know, I would check into that a little bit, like, because that's not the source that they're coming from, you know. But there's so much playfulness, laughter. It's also why when we're lighter and we have less clutter and we're more playful, we get more intuitive experiences.
I completely agree with that. So I think a lot of people who tune into a channel like this, where I interview a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, is because they've experienced some kind of loss in their life. What have you learned from working with the other side about our loved ones?
I have learned that there is a beautiful transition process that we go through in crossing over. I'm going to start with the thing that I've learned that is the most beautiful, that I've settled in, and it warms my heart. Um, Nobody comes here alone. Nobody arrives in Earth alone. It's impossible to be alone when you're born. It's just, we can think through that one. It's pretty basic. But also, nobody's supposed to be alone when they pass. And I don't mean hospital room. I don't mean, side of the road situation. I mean, no soul is alone when they pass. So whether it's a spirit or a guide or sometimes an intuitive that is just there to be present, somebody will show up. So nobody comes in here alone and nobody leaves alone. And I find that really beautiful because we spend a lot of our lives alone. We have lots of moments where we are alone. Now, that part is my favorite part, but the transition is quite fascinating too, because in this transitionary state is when we really process all of the experiences that we had, and we process them from all different angles. And by doing that, seeing all the different points of view with each experience that we had, that's what the higher self is wanting to collect. So we go through this transition process, and once we're done, cross over to the other side, and we're back to the best of ourselves, you could say, because we're not on linear time over there. So um, it's a beautiful process.
Wow. Well, I would imagine that there are people out there right now who are like, how can I work with you, Bo? So tell everybody, you have a YouTube channel, you have ways that they can do readings or courses, and I know you have your book. So tell us all about it.
Yes, the course, I'll start there because the course was after I worked with Big Dog for 2 years, he said, I need you to take everything I taught you and I need you to bring it out into the world. So that's what I did. Um, I condensed 2 years into 7 weeks, which was better. And I taught that in person for like 15 years. And then in 2019, my current guide, Peter, kind of out of the blue in the middle of the year said, I need you to put these online and like record them and teach online. I was really embarrassed because I was super camera shy back then. And I was like, I can't do video, oh no, but I did it. And it actually ended up working out really well. And then the pandemic hit. And that's when the online community started to build. So that's the course, 7 weeks long, with the experiments in the end, so you can figure out how you're wired uniquely. And that's been a passion of mine for a long time. I have a spiritual community, online spiritual community. I built that because when I opened up, I didn't have anyone to share with. I didn't have anybody to ask questions or to celebrate poodle eating green beans, right? So that's a safe, fun place where we all connect and we, do experiments with our intuition and things like that. Um, and then my book, you mentioned my book, that's my memoirs from the first 2 years. So if you want to know how wacky it is for an absolute stubborn-headed skeptic to like get real with herself and like open up intuitively, that's a good read. That's a
What's
good
the
read.
name of it?
Cracking Open Adventures of a Reluctant Medium. So, and I did the audiobook too. I was a good girl because I know some people really love the audiobooks. So, yeah, all of that. I keep everything at thesagemethod.com. So I make sure I keep it all there, including links to the YouTube channel and the podcast. I put out a podcast once a week, which I love. I teach a little and do a little bit of story time and stuff like that. So,
Beautiful. All right, I'm going to ask you one last question.
okay.
Bo, what do you feel that you know for sure?
I feel that I know for sure that this life is a gifted adventure and that I have not control, but I am absolutely a conscious creator in it. And when I came to that deep realization, I started to really enjoy my life. So to say that to everyone else, for them, that they are conscious creators. What they think about, they bring about, all of those good things. And to be playful with it, please, and recognize the synchronicities. And then your lens that you're looking through for this lifetime changes, and it's a good thing.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Well, Bo, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, my cousin.
Yes, cousin. Yes.
And I want to thank you. Thank you for hanging up that skeptical viewpoint and opening yourself up. And thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing,
Aw.
which is hugely needed. So, so grateful for you doing this work.
It's my pleasure. These conversations, as everybody knows, feeds my soul. But of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you who tune in to watch, to listen, and to share these beautiful experiences with somebody who needs them. If you still have questions, you can join me for Wake Up Wednesdays live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Do you believe that love never dies and you want to hear stories that prove it? Well, hit the subscribe button. You belong here.